All right, hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Saturday, September 25th, 2021. This is your evening tropical update. Well, tonight we continue to track major Hurricane Sam, a powerful Category 4 hurricane in the central Atlantic, located right about here on your satellite shot this evening. We also have the remnants of Teresa, the subtropical storm that formed yesterday, has already been dissipated, and the Hurricane Center has written their last advisory, the low level swirl located here north of Bermuda. We're also watching several areas of interest tonight. We have the remnants of Peter still kind of hanging out here and could potentially reform a little bit over the next few days. We have a tropical wave moving off of Africa that's got about a 60% shot to develop as it moves out. And then later, towards the weekend, we'll be watching yet another wave out here after this wave passes that could also be trying to follow it. So the main development region is part of the season not wanting to shut down, even though we are rapidly approaching October. But none of this crap really matters besides Sam tonight, so we'll go ahead and get to the latest on that. Hurricane Sam, 5 p.m. from the National Hurricane Center. Maximum sustained winds increased to 140 miles an hour this evening, although those winds are probably even higher tonight. Not long after the Hurricane Center wrote this advisory, Hurricane Hunter aircraft got out there and found stronger winds. We'll show you that in a second. But moving to the west-northwest at 10 miles an hour, and one of the first things you notice about this cone tonight is this thing has shifted somewhat to the north and to the east and no longer draws the northern Antilles within the cone of uncertainty. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean the threat is literally zero, but the general consensus has been today that Sam has intensified, possibly even a little bit quicker than anticipated, but it's also caused the models to shift a little bit more north and east, and really more of the models that were more south and west are falling back more towards the GFS solution. And I would say confidence has increased a good bit that Sam is likely going to miss the Antilles. So folks in the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guadeloupe, areas like that, probably going to get a near miss. Now they may come close enough for some inclement weather, definitely going to increase swell waves and things like that, but it's probably not going to be a direct hit, which is good news. That also bodes well for the eastern U.S. If Sam is not going to go that much further south and west, then it does appear that impacts to the eastern U.S. are becoming less likely, although they're not off the table. We'll talk about the scenarios as well. So we'll go ahead and show you the satellite presentation. First things first tonight with Sam. Pretty beautiful storm. You can see here this thing really kind of clearing out and standing upright in the last few hours after this morning, struggling a little bit. It tried to do an eye wall replacement cycle earlier, failed, and then that eye opens back up, and you see those really nice deep cloud tops forming around that central eye. So, a little bit ragged here this morning. Kind of struggling. I was cloud filled at times. And then earlier this afternoon, it just stood up and was looking really healthy. Now, one of the things you notice here, if I go through this kind of slowly, is when this thing first kept going, you have this full ring of those white cloud tops. Those are cloud temperatures in the negative 75 to negative 80 degree range. Those are incredibly cold cloud tops surrounding that eye and that central dense overcast, indicating a really powerful hurricane. But then you'll watch that northern side, and there's some degradation right here. You can see that they kind of break down and they turn more back into dark, towards the blacks and reds, and then the reds continue. And now you've kind of gotten this good portion of the storm that's eroded, and this has become some northerly wind shear, kind of like more of a northwest wind shear was sort of acting on the storm, northeast, northwest kind of flow as a high off to the north here. I think a little bit of flow is getting down here along with just a little bit of dry air. That dry air wasn't able to punch the core. This storm is too strong, but I think the dry air was eroding. Now, in the last hour or so, Sam has tried to wrap that back around, so we'll see how that plays out. But other than that, this thing is in nearly perfect conditions. Plenty of warm water, light wind shear. Other than that, not no way dry air is going to get into the storm. It's pretty healthy tonight. Hurricane Hunters punched this thing a couple times and found some pretty impressive results. Three punches to the core of Sam this evening reveal essential pressure right around 942 or so millibars and flight level winds up to 140 knots in the second core pass. And SFMR winds, which is what we use to estimate surface winds over here, is actually indicating that Sam's a category 5 off of these. You're seeing winds 135 to 145 knots, you several unflagged SFMR readings around that level. But the flight level winds aren't corresponding. So flight level winds are definitely off the surface. So what you do typically is you have to step these winds down to what you would get for the surface winds, and we're not really seeing the correlation here. Like if you're going to see category 5, you're going to see like 160, 165 knots, and then that steps down to your surface winds. We're not really seeing the correlation, so I don't think Sam's a category 5, but it is pretty close. The other thing is it's very intense. This storm is very intense, but it's very small. The core of the strongest winds is very small. Notice how fast this thing ramps up. Like this is tracking your surface winds. Even if we're not believing they're at 145 knots in the surface, um, you know, down here, just a few miles from the eye, you're talking about a Category 1 hurricane, and then up here, you're talking about a Category 4 near Category 5. So Sam really is a hyper intense storm around that 10 to 15 mile, around the core, and then outside of that, it's much weaker. So it doesn't discount how strong the storm is, but it doesn't. It's definitely not a monster that's like got this huge wind field associated with it. So impacts are extreme at the core, but they're also limited away from the center of the storm. We also see mesovortices in the eye. This is from Andy Hazelton on Twitter. He was retweeting Kalen here, and they were talking about some drops. Um, some drop signs where we saw incredible surface winds over 180 knots and central pressure in the 890s. And what that really is showing is that there's the little small mesovortices rotating in the eye, which are like tornado-like features that rotate in the eye. You see them with very intense hurricanes, and definitely Sam is producing some of those, as some of these drops did indicate. So this isn't indicative of the actual storm's strength, but it is showing you that it's got a very violent, intense core. Look at the water vapor imagery kind of in the zoom out here. So again, Sam here, and again, what we're watching for is Sam to generally move to the west-northwest over the next few days, and it's going to move along the edge of the subtropical ridge building ahead of it. So what you have here largely is an area of high pressure in this region, and this high is slowly moving this way. You have a trough over here, but it's not going to catch Sam, and then your next trough and your next cold front's moving off. So Sam is going to kind of rotate around this high for the next couple of days, but then as this high moves, the high moves over here in a couple days, and then Sam is going to try to rotate around that high and out to sea. And our models have kind of picked up on some changes. So we're going to go back to Wednesday at 12Z. I'll show you both the European and the GFS. You can see that the GFS and Euro have corrected. The Euro is now much closer to where the GFS before. The Euro was here and the GFS was here on Wednesday, and now they've come together, much more in the middle, but they're both offshore enough of the islands to, have any direct impacts be missed. And this lines up well in the short term. All the Euro ensembles and GFS ensembles are, the GFS is not shifted. It's where it's been for the last couple of days, but we notice the Euro, now seeing a stronger storm, is also shifting its model runs to the north and to the east. So again, that confidence has increased that the Antilles probably aren't getting a direct strike from this one. The other bit of good news is that models are starting to abandon that cutoff low feature we were talking about. So again, when we're talking about Sam later this week, so this is Wednesday, this is a couple days from now, we're recording on Saturday, so about 4 or 5 days, we'll go really towards Thursday, Friday. So as Sam is turning towards the East Coast and is trying to figure out a way to turn out to sea, before models were indicating that we actually had this like cutoff low feature over here by the Carolinas, and Sam was either it was going to rotate up around the low and then either get pulled back into the coast or turn out to sea. We weren't really sure which one it was going to do. Well, now models are becoming more confident that this this trough over the eastern U.S. isn't going to cut off. It's going to hold together. And what that does is it gives Sam more of an opportunity to ride up in that trough and turn away and out to sea. GFS shows this well. If we go back, we'll just set you up for Saturday, but we go back a couple runs, we can see here that this was yesterday where the cutoff low was down here, and this could coax Sam to turn more towards the coast, where now we're seeing that the trough stays more uniform, and you can see here now, the GFS holds this as one feature, and again, this is more of an indication this is going to turn out to sea. European also buying that as well. I go to Thursday, Friday, even into Saturday, and it looks like Sam turns well off the coast, well far enough for any direct impact. So it's not like a completely get out of the woods, sort of deal, but even the ensembles now are pretty much uniform in showing this well out to sea. The GFS continues to, hold this west of, 65 degree or east of 65 degrees west, which is good news. European definitely comes closer. A lot of the models are, to the west of 65 West. They come closer before the turn, and you have one or two outliers that turn the storm. Again, some of these models still see that cutoff low and kind of turn it in, but the vast majority of members now are turning Sam out to sea, both in the GFS and the European models. So a bit of good news tonight that Sam looks more likely to turn offshore. We're going to keep watching it. And I think folks in the eastern U.S., probably more like North Carolina and northward, need to really watch this. I think Florida, the Gulf Coast is off the hook, obviously. Florida is probably off the hook. Georgia, South Carolina, probably not direct impacts. I mean, I'd say North Carolina northward, I would still keep an eye on it, but as long as these trends hold, we're going to be okay. It would take some pretty wild stuff, I think, at this point for Sam to really start bucking these trends. I think the confidence is pretty good. This one's going to figure out how to get out to sea. But it is an impressive hurricane tonight, and we'll see if Sam can make a run at Category 5 or not. The last couple of frames of the satellite look like it may not be able to. We might be starting to see an eye wall replacement, see that eye shrinking in those last few frames. But some colder cloud tops are popping up, so we'll see much longer the hurricane hunters can stay out there, and if we can maybe see a Cat 5 or not. It's always nice to observe them when we know they're nowhere near land, so we'll see what Sam does. And just keep an eye on the rest of the tropics. None of this crap out here really is too worrisome. I don't think these waves can get across Africa and out here. If Sam couldn't do it, these ones aren't going to have much more luck, I don't think. This guff with Peters, nothing to worry about. Teresa, obviously nothing to worry about. But I think we are already looking at trends that tell us that our October Caribbean sort of season is going to get going sooner than later. So we'll keep an eye on that. But otherwise, tonight looking like mostly good news. And we'll keep an eye on Sam over the next couple of days. So that's got what I got for you guys tonight. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one.